Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel McLean, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you in our space tonight. One of the things that I do is to work with women in the Australian Church as a member of the Executive Committee. But tonight I join you as an avid listener of the Australian Women Preach podcast. I'm honoured to be hosting tonight's celebration of the third birthday of the Australian Women's Preach podcast, which was so recently affirmed by Bishop Vincent Long when he shared with us that the Australian Women Preach podcast that has completed its full cycle of the 3-year lectionary, without institutional support, they have persisted in this venture by proclaiming the good news to others, just as Mary of Magdala. It is a true mark of Christian women's resilience, agency, and equal discipleship. Bishop Vincent is one of 36,000 listeners who have joined the preachers over the last 3 years to tap into the lived witness and unique wisdom, the wonderful insights of these amazing women who have brought the gospel to life. Tonight on Zoom, let us lean into the wisdom of those on the screen, each of us gathered here, and connect with these norms. Please honour each other as we embark on this journey of celebration. Tonight will be an opportunity to meet the team behind Australian Women Preach, to learn more about the podcast and to have your questions answered. But first, let's catch our breath. Let's press pause. I invite you to take a moment to ground yourself, to place your feet on the floor beneath you, to take a moment to contemplate the history that lies in the earth below and the skies above. Perhaps you could take a moment to focus, to become attentive to your breath and aware of the breath of each of those gathered online. In connecting with our breath, let us connect to the millions of footprints and breaths that have been breathed by those of dreaming pathways from time immemorial. We connect in with our own loved ones, and perhaps you might like to join us, women in the Australian Catholic Church, the Australian Church, as we work together towards reconciliation and celebrating unity and identity for the future. I invite you to join us in this affirmation, in this acknowledgement. I'm here up in Gimoy country in Cairns, and this is the image that I look out on. You might like to join me affirming this space, affirming your relationship to country by saying, may we live in harmony with all those who share this sacred earth and be thankful. Our acknowledgement opens up an invitation into prayer before we start our dialogue this evening. And I've drawn on the deep tradition of contemplation, spiritual contemplation for tonight, and invite you just in this short moment of stillness to explore this week's scripture in the Catholic lectionary for the third week of Lent, that of the Samaritan woman at the well. The magnificent, in my view, Mary Colo preached powerfully on this piece of scripture for the 105th episode of Australian Women Preach. Maybe tonight you'll go and have a listen to her wisdom after the Zoom. But for now, let's join us in this prayer as we reflect on the wisdom of the woman at the well, on the wisdom of all of the women who have followed her lead and borne witness to the radical love of Christ. As I stand before the Creator of the spring rains, I allow Jesus, the living water, to wash through me.
The Gospel is attributed to John. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "So you have no bucket, and the well is deep. where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water."
As we ponder, I see how all that is good, how every gift descends from on high. Just as water flows from the fountain, I see justice, goodness, mercy, and love flow into creation and flow into me. And perhaps you might like to say these words out loud in the space that you're gathered, a prayer that's been inspired by that courageous woman at the well. Lord Jesus, I give thanks for each encounter with you and for transforming my life with your loving presence. I pray that, like the Samaritan woman, I may come to know your hope, courage, and compassion, and experience your light and living waters. Help me to respond in service, to be your hands and feet, eyes and ears, and voice for you in the world. Amen. It is a delight to be gathered here with some amazingly wise women on our screen, and you're going to see us all pop up a bit like the Brady Bunch now. And we're going to introduce ourselves and the role that we have played as part of the Australian Women Preach podcast team. I'd like to introduce members of the original committee. Not all of us are able to be here tonight, so we have some from our past and present committee members, and we'll introduce those around the screen as we go. So I'd like to introduce firstly Patricia.
Hello, my name is Patricia Gemmell. I'm a member of the Australian Grail, which co-sponsors Australian Women Preach, and I've been involved with this project from the very beginning. In fact, it began out of a conversation I had with Tracy McEwen. And before I knew it, we had a team, and we've been going ever since.
The power of conversations, Patricia, and it's apt that our next person is Tracy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy McEwen, and as Tricia said, I'm part of the original team, and I like to remember the phone call I got from Tricia where she said I was awake in the middle of last night and I had an idea. And it's just been such a joy and a privilege to be part of the team that produces the podcast.
Thank you, Tracy. Cole Rowe is not joining us tonight, but she's an integral member of the team, as is Beck Beisler. Elizabeth Lee joins us tonight. I'll invite you to introduce.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lee. I'm coming to you from Biddigal Land on the northern side of Botany Bay in Sydney. And I was on the original team for 2 years. I'm a member of the Grail, and I have preached on 2 occasions on the podcast.
Thank you, Liz. And rounding out our team is Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Marquis. I live in Lutruwita, Tasmania, on the land of the Muwinina and Palawa peoples. I am the administrative assistant of WATAC and have been a part of Australian Women Preach since the beginning, inspired by the 2020 BBI Women as Church Conference, which is where I first met Andrea Dean and Tracy and Tricia.
Thank you, Angela. So there are our originating committee members, if you like. From the beginning of time, they have been working with Louise Marr. Imagine if we measured time from the commencement of the Australian Women Preach podcast, what history would say about us. But let's introduce Louise Marr, who produces the podcast for us. And I'll just note before Louise jumps in that we also honour the ever creative and resilient Danielle Ann Lynch, who wrote, produced, performed the track that appears on all of the podcasts. Louise, you're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel, and hello, everybody. I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal land, Canberra, in the ACT, capital of Australia. I'm a former journalist and ABC presenter. In the past few years, I've done a few other things. I produced a podcast for the War Memorial, and I've created an audio app for the National Portrait Gallery. And I was introduced to Tracy by a mutual friend, and after initially saying, no way am I getting involved in anything religious, when Tracy informed me that, yes, that this was a big, well, I won't use our expression, but to the patriarchy of the church who deny women a voice, I said, I'll be in. And it's been my great pleasure to have produced the podcast, which I think is the easiest job. It's just the nuts and bolts of it over the past 3 years.
And what a gift it is to have you as part of our team. Thank you, Louise. The committee has been joined and supported by Philippa Wixie, Gail Gill, and Angela. Angela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Rachel. I'm Angela McCarthy. I'm an adjunct senior lecturer in theology from Notre Dame University, and I come to you from Whadjuk country in the Noongar Nation in Perth. Delighted to be part of this group. I've only been part of it for a few months now, but it is certainly a great delight to me. And where our voices are not heard in other areas, and certainly in my life, it's wonderful to be heard in this particular way. So thank you to all.
Thank you, Angela. Joining on screen as a new member of the group is Racy Espino. Welcome, Racy. Would you like to share where you're joining us from? Looks like we've got a bit of a lag on your screen there, Racy. Oh, here we go.
Queensland. Yes, I got invited to speak first. Yes, I was invited to preach. I was number 44 to be exact in the first. It was the first year of it, and I was so passionate about it. I'm involved in women's group here in Brisbane with Jenny Close, and that was the start. And when when Tracy said that, oh, we need help, I said, oh, I don't want it to. That was last year, and I said, oh, maybe I could join. I could only do a little bit, but now I'm helping with the Facebook ads, and hopefully that bit helps.
It does indeed. Racy, thank you for joining us, and we'll hear a little bit more from Racy later this evening. Thank you. Racy also alluded to Jenny, who joins us tonight on the screen. Jenny.
Okay, so sorry, I'm Jenny Close. I'm coming to you from Brisbane and the land of Yagara and Turrbal people. So I joined the committee fairly recently, only a couple of months ago with Racy, and my job is to make the social media images every week. I took over that role from Beck Beisler, who'd been doing it for quite a few years. So I've preached twice for Australian Women Preach.
Thank you, Jenny, and we'll hear a bit more from you too later. And rounding out the committee then is Wendy Goonan. So these incredible women bring the Australian Women Preach podcast, all of the logistics to life. They're supported by a FAR from Andrea Dean, who we'll hear from later this evening, and all of you who say yes to listening to the podcast. So thank you for your contributions. We heard a little bit about the origin story, and you might be picking up that Tracy is a woman who has great connections and the ability to drag you out of a slumber and into a space of action. That's my life story whenever I meet with Tracy. So let's hear a little more of the origin story from Trisha and Tracy. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Look, it really started with the plenary council, with my facilitating lots of listening and dialogue sessions around the question, what is God asking of us at this time? And over again, I heard people longing for good sermons that related the gospel to our lives. And the recommendation came through in one of the plenary discernment papers can we have lay people preaching? Well, as you know, COVID happened and the plenary council was delayed for a year. And it was during that time that one night I lay awake wondering, what could I do to embody something from all the discernment that had happened? And I had this sudden thought, why not just get women to preach every week? I tentatively shared this idea with Tracy McEwen. Why don't we just find a woman to preach every week to normalise the voice of a woman breaking open the word of God? And Tracy, to my surprise, was really enthusiastic. So a small group of us met initially on Zoom over a number of weeks to discern what we would do and how we would do it. And right from the start, we wanted to be as inclusive and as diverse as possible. Once we'd decided what we wanted, we went looking for a team, and we could not have asked for more with the women who came on board. I really think we are a dream team. Tracy.
So that fateful day, I got the phone call from Patricia saying, I lay awake last night and wondering, and somewhat serendipitously, at the same time, I had come to the realization that being in like any kind of reform space in the church felt like I was always pushing against the crowd. I wanted a sense that I was moving with something and towards something that was generating change rather than continually complaining or whinging about what other people were doing. So I wanted something that was I was looking for an idea, and Trisha gave it to me, something that was a bit subversive, but that would also generate something and unite women. So I guess I'd seen this kind of recognition that there was a group of conservative women and there was a group of liberal women, and I really don't like dichotomies. I don't like that idea. So it was the idea that we come together and we produce something, and it's, I guess, like as Louise said, like a bit of a kind of thumbs up, catch up, guys, this is what we're doing, join us or not. And as it happens, lots of people joined us. When we first met as a group, it was quite startling. We hadn't brought Louise on just yet, and we all got on Zoom together, and it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and we had a conversation that started off a bit like, who's ever listened to a podcast? And at that point, I can tell you now that of that original group, more than half of us had never listened to a podcast. So that was kind of where we started from, and the learning curve was incredibly steep. And what I feel like now is that we've generated something wonderful. I liken it a little bit to the garden that's out the back of the church. So we wanted it to be something that wasn't kind of burning down the church, but generating something wonderful that was a collection for future generations.
And that wonderful collection that both Tracy and Trisha have breathed it life into is animated through the tenacity and cleverness of the logistic team that help pull the podcast together. So to share a little bit more about the logistics of how the Australian Women Preach podcast gets to your podcast place, I'm going to invite Angela to share a little bit.
Thanks, Rachel. Sorry.
Thanks, Rachel.
When we first began, I did a lot of the emailing, a job shared by Tracy and supported, as always, by the whole team. As we grew, we began to share responsibility for this role, which has been a godsend. However, back in 2021, as a team, we wrote some form letters. The first was an initial invitation explaining who we were, what we were trying to do. And into that form letter, we left blanks into which we placed correct week from the lectionary, the associated gospel passage, along with some basic process information. Initially, we went for well-known women or women we knew who might be interested in preaching for us. We've always kept track of the preacher's status on a shared Google Doc, which still has all 157 published episodes, along with the status of our future preachers, some of whom who have been invited and others who have already preached but not yet had their sermon released, and everything in between. If a preacher declines, we move to another name. If they accept, we send a thank you form letter, which gives further information, such as what will be required of them, and also to request a headshot bio title. We've developed this over the course of the last 3 years. So we've taken on feedback from Louise, our preachers, and our own experience about what is working, what's not working. And then we hand it over to Louise, really, who organises the Zoom with the preacher. But from my part, we also do a congratulations on the release of your podcast form letter, which is usually sent out in the week of publication. But there are a few more steps prior to that, aren't there, Angela?
Yes, there are a few more. As you can see, there's a rather intricate process, and the emailing is crucial, and keeping up with that and keeping it documented is very, very important. So whoever's on the email then saves the headshot in one space, saves the bio in another space, and then Tracy has been doing it for some years, and occasionally I've relieved her. But then those things have to come together and to be brought into Spotify, which is now Anchor, and sometimes processes change there. But those all those things then have to come together, and once they're together in Spotify, then it's over to Louise. No, it's over to not Louise. Louise has done her job by then of putting it together. And then it gets uploaded. And of course, then the next step is it remains silent unless somehow we get the word out there. So we have Jenny doing images, and we have Wendy on Facebook, and we have Beck doing marketing on social media as well. So getting it out there is the critical final step.
As both of you were talking, thank you for sharing. I got a sense of those early Christian communities post the walk to Emmaus, little sparks flying along the firesides, baking bread and thinking about all of the things that you do to get that story out into the world in the form of a podcast. So I can see the flames taking place at our campfires through the logistics that you've just shared a little bit about. Thank you, Angela and Angela. What gift. The people who put it into the space that we then stream through our cars or our headphones, or I've got a vision of people sitting around a dining room table listening to it over a meal. Those people who bring that to life are Louise and Jenny. So Louise, would you like to share a little bit about how you go about producing an episode?
Sure, thanks, Rachel. And I think you can understand now, after hearing from the two Angelas, you'll understand what I said about I have the easy job, because I think the toughest part of this is finding these amazing women and then doing all that legwork to work out when they'll be available and sharing with them how to go about it to help them do the best job that they can for the podcast. And I tip my hat to them, really. It's fantastic. So what I get on this fabulous Google Doc is a list of the women in their little boxes with contact details and when they're due, when their sermon is due to be heard, basically. And then it's my job to get in touch with those individual women and work with them for a time that suits them and suits me to be able to record them over Zoom. And then we set up a Zoom meeting and I record them. And I decided at the start that I didn't want it to be a process whereby if there was a mistake or a problem along the way that I would jump in and stop them, because my understanding is, you know, it's a sermon and you need to be in the flow to be able to deliver it. So the way I do it is I ask them at the start to just deliver their sermon And if there's any little stumble or glitch along the way that they pick up themselves, just to go back to the start of the sentence and continue. And then when we get to the end of the recording, I'm following along with whatever text I have of the sermon. When we get to the end, if there have been any problems, or if I've picked up something that if they've jumped over a word or sometimes jumped over a line, which you can do, we all do it. Then I take them back and we repeat those bits that weren't quite right, and then I say goodbye to them, and then I sit down and put it together, stitch it together, edit it together with the editing software that I have. So it's all very straightforward, and along the way I just get to meet these amazing, diverse women. I remember one of the questions, many questions I had for Tracy when we had our first conversation over the phone was, I said, where are you going to find, a woman who wants to do this? And Tracy just laughed and said, oh no, we'll have plenty of women. But the fact that we have had so many different women over 150 plus episodes just absolutely amazes me. And it's been a great joy to meet them all and to listen to what they've had to say. And it's just been fantastic. And look, it doesn't always go to plan. We've had issues over time differences when I haven't realised that someone's in Perth, and then there's a lot of toing and froing. But it's a great source of pride to me, and I have a great deal of gratitude to the team for the fact that we have never, ever missed a week in getting the podcast, as I would say, to air. So thank you very much, all of you.
It's incredible. Jenny, would you like to share a little bit about your role?
Yeah, well, I make the social media images. Now, I'm a theologian, but my background, my first degree was in fine arts. So it's kind of up my street to be doing images, making images with, around theological issues, especially with liturgy. So, it comes naturally to me to do that. So my job is fairly straightforward and simple, but, I put the images together with all the bits and pieces that I have to put in the notes about which text it is, which day it is, all of the, and the photograph of the presenter, and so all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I send off one image. I send off to Racy, who puts it on Facebook, and then the other one I send off to Wendy, and she puts it on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. And so because I don't do social media at all, I don't engage with it. So I trust them to do it, and they do it wonderfully. Thank you.
And Jenny, what a beautiful way, I think, of summarising how we find our place in the mechanisms of this space. So we go to our strengths, share our strengths to bring these stories to life. And Louise and Jenny, thank you both for sharing the contributions that you make on a regular basis to this podcast. The podcast would not exist without the tenacity, the courage, the creativity of the women who have preached. And we've got two witnesses who are going to share their experience tonight. I'll start with Liz.
Thanks, Rachel. So despite having theological studies and pastoral training, and having been a prison chaplain leading chapel services inside jails, the tradition and practice has silenced my voice within the Catholic Church. But Australian Women Preach and my current worshipping community have touched my lips such that I can speak in ways that the Catholic Church doesn't let women speak. So I have, along with more than 100 other women, have spoken and been heard across these 153 podcasts over these 3 years. I found the process to be very enabling and empowering. Louise is so skilled at her craft, and gentle and encouraging in leading us through the process. When I check in with family and friends, those who've engaged with the shared sermons are always so affirming. But I acknowledge that there are many out there for whom they are still so disconnected from the church and are unable to engage. So I think part of what Australian Women Preach is doing is witnessing there is another way to be church.
Thank you, Liz, for that raw sharing of your faith journey, and then your commitment to sharing your theology with the broader community. Racy, welcome. Would you like to share your experience?
Yes, I hope you could hear me. When my daughter was young, she asked me, "Mom, how come there's only male priests? How can I be a priest?" And that, oh my gosh, that's a very hard question, my dear. And then I began my research and said, yeah, let's see, let's look into this. And then we figured out there's a other denomination with lady priests, lady preachers. And then I got involved in the plenary council, where we wanted to be the voice of women, to be heard. So when I got the chance, when I got an invite to speak in Australian We Preach, I got so excited. I said, oh my gosh, this is a chance to show my daughter that it can be done. We can make a difference. I might not see it in my lifetime, but at least being a part and telling her that it's possible, even if it's not in the hierarchy of a big thing, we could still make a difference. And being a part of the Australian Women Preach helped me in explaining that. It was quite a humbling experience, only because I've realized there's so much to make the sermon, or to make the reflection meaningful. Research, reflection, and discernment is very important. Like, it took me a while to listen to my, and ask other people's opinion of what input that they could give me. And practice. I'm not so used to speaking or recording my voice in the podcast. So it was a first time experience for me. And your question about am I able to share it? Yes, I was able to share it everywhere. My relatives in the Philippines for the first time said, I didn't realize you can do a podcast. And I said, oh, it's the voice of women. Even the church, the community where my parents belong, their Catholic church that they belong to, they even shared it with them, and they said, oh, they said, maybe we should go into this also. So it was an inspiration for everybody, and to see that we could make a difference. One sermon, or what shall I say, one reflection at a time.
So beautifully spoken, Racy. And I love that you talked about, being the voice for, being a model of voice and witnessing what voice is, to help build the change of the future. We are so cognizant of the importance of ensuring people have voice. And I spoke to a couple of committee members who are unable to join us tonight. But I'd like Tracy, if you don't mind, just to reference the contribution and the voice of those three women.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I just want to acknowledge Beck and Cole and Wendy, who kind of didn't fit on the screen tonight, because we thought 9 was a good round number, and it was just all of us squeezed on. We thought we might be all a little bit too much for you, because we are a lot, but we're just so amazing. So Beck, she does a lot of the social media stuff as well. She's just trained as a teacher, and we're just so grateful for her connections particularly in the Uniting Church, because we all work and do other jobs as well. It seems like with the amount of work that we do that this is full time, but no, we have jobs and we do lots of other stuff as well. Cole is our amazing minute keeper. So just to give you an idea, we meet for 1 hour every single week, and you might think that after 3 years that might be beginning to feel like a bit of a trial, but it is something, a time that I look forward to every single week. But Cole keeps us in check. She keeps the minutes rolling out, and that's just amazing. Wendy came on board this year after our additional call out, and Wendy has been amazing with process. So she's been helping us look at mailing lists and has got all our paperwork in order and our email in order in a way that the rest of us just can't imagine, that we just didn't have time to do. So thank you so much, Beck, Cole and Wendy, for everything that you do. And just one last shout out, and I know Patricia's going to have it there because I know her really well. One of the amazing things that we've done is creating the book in her voice. Have you got it there, Tricia, to hold up so that everybody can see? So it was an amazing achievement putting that book together. And yes, we've got our mugs that Karen from Garrett Publishing got us. So hop on, if you haven't got a copy of the book, I really suggest you hop on the little ad for Garrett there, hop on their website and grab a copy. And you know, just because we like to keep everything in our network, in our family, that's Angela's sister's artwork on the front cover of the book. So thank you so much to her as well. So I'll be quiet now.
Tracy, your enthusiasm is infectious. Thank you for bringing the people who weren't able to fit on the screen in your words into our dialogue today. They really do hold the fullness of this work. Someone who's going to join us now is new to as a member of WATAC, but has had a long and varied involvement in different spaces of church life. So I'd like to introduce you to Sue. Sue, would you like to give a little hello and where you're from?
Hello, yes, Sue Whitnam, and I'm zooming in from Gadigal Land tonight. And just as part, and I've been a new member of the WATAC committee for the last year, and we'll be helping with the Zooms this year. And I've just been sitting in on these weekly meetings for the last couple of weeks as we've planned this podcast, and just amazed at the volume, the amount of work that's involved behind the scene. As a volunteering group, the commitment's extraordinary. I can understand the delight that you take after seeing and being part of those discussions. I can understand how rewarding it is for all of you to be part of it. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted to showcase that work that goes behind the scenes. So I'm going to ask everybody listening, we've got 145 people who are still dialed into the Zoom. If you've got questions or things that you're pondering in your head and your heart as you've heard the team tonight, please jump on the Q&A and leave those thoughts and questions so we can bring them to the committee over the next 20 minutes. It would be great to be able to bring people listening. And we apologise that we haven't got more of the chat, but we were really thrilled with the number of people who have jumped on to be part of this webinar. So it's just a Q&A, and I'll put the questions to the team. But I wanted to ask, just hearing about the process of developing sermons and supporting people, does a person who is writing a sermon or having a sermon in development, do you match them with a particular committee member who becomes their mentor and who supports them in the writing of the sermon? I wonder if anyone would like to respond to that question. Angela, please.
I'm happy to respond on one count. Many of the women that are chosen by the committee are already excellent and are already speaking publicly, whether teaching or however their workplace takes them. So they're very competent women. Just occasionally we'll have one that finds some difficulties. Like last year we had a Jewish woman who gave us a homily. She has studied the New Testament, but between the time of her writing and the time that it was meant to go online, October 7th happened and greatly disturbed her and deeply, deeply affected her. So her recording was therefore affected, and we had to work with her over some weeks to moderate, in a sense, moderate some of the things that happened, just so that it was easier. No, that's probably not the right word, but that it was more fluent and it was more appropriate to Australian Women Preach.
Can I ask if this question about how we find women to actually be preachers for the podcast, I wanted to take that two ways. First of all, have you had women approach you who have not basically come to you and said, I would like to be a part of this, that weren't on your radar, that you've then be able to incorporate into an episode? Thanks, Angela.
Yes, we've had many women who email us and ask if they can be part of the podcast. Some are already preaching in their own context and others may not have preached before. But yes, we're very open, and at the end, the thank you email that I talked about before includes a can you please recommend any other preachers? So that's another way we've received lots of incredible names to be put forward to preach. And anyone who's listening tonight and feels like they would like to preach for Australian Women Preach, please contact us.
And a great point, the power of a referral, or the power of actually tapping someone on the shoulder and asking them to do something as well. That is gold. So yes, we would encourage anybody listening to the webinar to help that. Can I ask, have you ever cold called somebody who, I mean, you've got a rich network and fantastic relationships that go deep right across the church. Tracy?
We cold call all the time. Like most of the approaches that we make, certainly in the initial phase of the podcast, we very much used our networks. But even though, like, Trisha and I were connected, you know, and we had connections between us when we started, we're very diverse. We've never actually all physically met because a lot of the initial phase and the initial season of the podcast was during the pandemic. So we do come from diverse places and have diverse networks, but we cold call all the time. And we have people cold calling us all the time now saying, you know, can I preach? Or, you know, I've got a friend who I think, or my mum or my sister, or, you know, somebody in my church. Liz, did you want to say something more there?
I think also we're quite intentional about maximising diversity. And so we may recognise, well, we haven't had a voice from this particular cohort of people for a while. Is there someone that can come to mind? Or can we make some contacts to fill out and try and have that inclusive, diverse range of preachers?
Fantastic. We've got some questions coming in from the Q&A now that I'll put to the group. Anne Byrne has asked, is there likely to be another book? Oh, poor Angela Marquis. Who would like to pick this up? I mean, you have this extraordinary...
I can pick that one up. That book was so much work. It doesn't look that thick, but it was so much work and it was exhausting. We would really love there to be another book. So if there's somebody out there listening amongst the attendees tonight who would like to come on board as a book editor, you know, join the team. We'd love to have you. You know, 3 years of the podcast has left the original team feeling somewhat fatigued, which is why we're so happy to have our new members. But even with the new membership, you know, when illness and family life and jobs get in the way, you know, it takes its toll. I noticed that there was a question there about the book, about whether like what was in the book. And the book is a collection of sermons from our preachers. And when we decided that we were doing the book, we put a call out to all our preachers, and we had so many more come back saying that they wanted to be part of the book than we had spots. So we do have enough for another volume if we've got the energy within the team to do it. But it is a selection. We looked at diversity and different denominations and other aspects of diversity that came into create the collection.
Or just a comment there. I'm always pushing for an ebook, of course, but that's a conversation for another time. But also, now that we've achieved it, well, the others have achieved the 3-year cycle. Now we can actually put together, hopefully, a volume for to cover the full 3-year cycle. So I think that'd be a good thing to do. Anyway.
But the book at the moment, for people who haven't yet rushed out and bought it, and they must, the book does cover the whole church year. So you can, and it takes a selection of sermons from across the first 2 years, doesn't it? The first 2 years, and then gives us the unfolding church year. So you can read the sermons for Lent or for Advent or an ordinary time as you go.
And it was the book of the year for Garrett Publishing. So
congratulations to all team. And this was, of course, the book was the focus of the International Women's Day celebrations a year ago on the 2-year anniversary. And yes, book of the year now when we're coming up to 3rd year.
And just one more thing about the book, I'm interrupting you here, Sue, is
No.
I gave it to Pope Francis last year. So we like to think that Pope Francis has a copy sitting on his bedside table and he reads our preaching. We are sure that he is one of our many subscribers, but in addition to that, he has a copy on his bedside table. Somebody asked earlier whether we had, I saw a question about whether we had, we'd received support from the institutional church, from clerics. We like to think that people in the institutional church are out there listening to us. We don't really know. But yeah, Pope Francis does have a copy of our book on his bedside table.
It's going to be hard to top that as a highlight from the podcast, Tracy, but I would be interested to hear from all of the panelists what for them has been the personal highlight of being part of this journey over the years. Patricia.
Absolutely, the bonds of friendship that we have developed, it's really very, very special, a great joy, and it's a great joy to be part of the team.
Other thoughts from the team?
I think the network, I'm an introvert, so I don't get to know a lot of people, don't have a lot of friends, which suits me fine. But getting to know people from around Australia is really quite, mind-blowing, really. Thanks.
It is a child of Zoom, isn't it? I mean, the podcast, being able to come together from all over the country to organise it, and then to be able to access a preacher in any part of the country and to have the whole support. And the fact that we're all fluent in webinars, we're fluent in podcasting, it's a creation of its time. It's extraordinary how just right for the times it's become. We had a question also in the Q&A. Does each sermon have to follow the Catholic prayer book? So I suppose it's the lectionary. So was that the intent always, that it was a mirror to the church experience, that here was a modelling of or a parallel church experience that was giving priority to women's voices? So the question was, does the sermon have to follow the Catholic lectionary? And I think
we've been a little fluid in some cases. For example, when our Jewish preacher preached for us, we said to relate to the gospel, but she also went back to the text from Isaiah. But we like to follow the lectionary as a rule. So, for example, this week we have an amazing podcast from Deborah Snoddy, who's preaching on the Year B reading. I think that the Samaritan Woman is an option if you are following the RCIA, but we've used the Year B lectionary reading, and Deborah Snoddy's sermon I encourage you all to listen to, because it is incredible. So yes, we do follow that.
it is. It's an eye-opener. It's extraordinary. One question from Jim Monahan in the chat. Why does AWP use sermon rather than homily? Angela McCarthy.
Yeah. That's an interesting question because, excuse me, we do interuse those two terms, but if we're going to be correct about it, we are giving homilies, not sermons. A sermon technically is a much stronger piece of work. It is longer. It has a very special rhetoric, and it certainly has a structure that is unlike what we do. So the correct term for us would be homily, but it has been used interchangeably with sermon. So maybe that's something that we can take note of.
Thank you. Just
It
encouraging.
it might just be that homily is a word that a lot of people don't understand.
It's also a very Catholic word, and we're an ecumenical podcast, and intentionally so. And that's very. We had was it somewhat heated, the discussion we had about whether we would be Australian Catholic Women Preach or Australian Women Preach, and I think we definitely made the correct decision to be Australian Women Preach. Most of the original team, had their roots in the Catholic tradition, but certainly that idea that we were having women who preached every Sunday on the podcast, as well as those women who had never preached before, as well as some women who teach men to preach in seminaries, like Mary Colo's out there listening. There's just such a rich diversity there. And I'm just looking through the Q&A, and I can see Peter Johnson's question there about, what we're doing to get the message out to the Second Assembly in October. And I guess we like to think just existing gets the message out. We focus on, as we intentionally focus on being the church that we want to be, rather than writing, protest letters or anything like that, or, it's a kind of subversive activism, if you like, that idea of just being. And that's a highlight for me, not exhausting myself with trying to fight something, actually generating something, and that being the protest.
Could I just say about the synod that paragraph 8N in the synthesis does say, I have it here, we need more creativity in establishing ministries according to the needs of local churches. One can think of further expanding responsibilities assigned to the existing ministry of lector. This could become a fuller ministry of the Word of God, which in appropriate contexts could also include preaching. So, is there some hope there? And I would really like to think that the fact that we have existed for 3 years has kept this issue alive. I mean, it certainly was discussed at the plenary council. It certainly was discussed at the synod. I hope that we've had some small part in keeping this issue alive.
I think no small part, I think a very major part in keeping it alive. It's interesting in the chat seeing the comments from Christian preachers, women preachers outside of the Catholic Church. And it is the Catholic women's struggle to find a voice and be heard in a parish by preaching the gospel. So in the week of International Women's Day, it's continuing and pressing feminist challenge as to how women find a role in the Catholic Church. I'm just interested to hear from again around the panel. What hope do you have for change in having women's voices more heard in Catholic churches?
Can I just go back to it, Sue? It's not only Catholic women who can't preach in churches. There are some other Christian denominations where women are silenced as well. And if they can preach, women are silenced often in other ways. So I wouldn't like to narrow, sorry to be a bit pushy, but I wouldn't like to narrow the power of the activism of the podcast to that kind of activism aspect to just being a voice for Catholic women. We think by amplifying women's voices, we I guess, create a better church and society for women, like wherever women aren't able to have full voice, you know, or wherever women and girls are not able to have full voice, that we have their issues.
Mm.
And to riff off Tracy there, I'm also thinking that it's not only about getting women's voices heard in the church, but how to get women's voices heard out to those who don't go to church.
Mm.
You know, that's a whole area that we can offer good preaching to and engagement with people who've given up on church.
Mm. Amen to that, Elizabeth. That's a beautiful note. I might just ask Rachel to come back into the discussion. We've got 5 minutes just to wrap this discussion up, and we have a very special video to close with that I'm sure everyone's excited to see soon. Rachel, can we bring you back?
Thank you, Sue, and thank you everybody for your wonderful contributions, both on the Q&A and on the screen. One of the things that we have been prefacing is the need to honour the voices and the wisdom of those in the room. And so we're hoping that you might contribute to that voice now as we move from this space into our next part of our lives. And I'd like you just to connect for a moment to what you've been hearing or thinking or seeing about the podcast and this amazing book. So for those of you who might want to learn more about it, the book you can purchase from Garrett Publishing. A very big thank you to the team there who supported us in bringing this story to life, a collection of podcasts. A collection of the podcasts now in print, and then where you can tap into those podcasts at your favourite app or podcast store. So thinking about what we've heard around the creation of the podcast, that call out about the possibility of creating 2 other books to help us with filling out the fullness of our lectionary. What's happening in your head, your heart, or the deepest part of who you are? Just thinking about what you're thinking, tapping into what you're thinking, tapping into what you're feeling, or tapping into what's moving, where the spirit is landing. And you might like to, in the, I think we're going to use the Q&A still, James, just pop into that same space a word or a phrase that you could leave with us so that your voice continues with us on this journey. What are you thinking, feeling, or feeling compelled, being moved to as a result of what we've heard today? And just for a moment, if you could, a word or a phrase in that space. And Trisha's got us off to a fabulous start. Thank you both, either in the chat or in the Q&A. And just let those words wash over you, the fullness of who we are, gathered in this space. One of the women who lives the fullness of our call for voice, for agency, for witnessing a church that we want to be is Andrea Dean, who is the chair of WADAC, and I'll invite her now to share a final reflection and link to International Women's Day. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. It's no coincidence that we celebrate this 3rd anniversary of Australian Women Preach in the week of International Women's Day. What a wonderful alignment. This year's theme is Inspire Inclusion. And indeed, Australian Women Preach helps us imagine a gender equal world. A world free of bias, stereotypes and discrimination. A world that's diverse, equitable and inclusive. A world and a church where difference is valued and celebrated Could I invite you to pray with me as we approach International Women's Day, this blessing for each other? May use your hands however you wish. May you celebrate women's achievement, raise awareness about discrimination, take action to drive gender parity, and together may we forge women's equality and inspire inclusion. Amen.
Amen. And I thank you for those wonderful words that are filling the screen. James, do you mind just putting the 9 back on the screen as we give a heartfelt thanks to the past, present and continuing contributors for the Australian Women Preach podcast, those that have joined us tonight and those who do all of the background work. Please join me. This is the sign language for applause. So we give you virtual applauses from afar to Trisha, Tracy, Cole, Beck, Liz, Angela, Louise, Danielle Ann Lynch, Philippa, Gail, Angela McCarthy, Angela, Wendy, Racy, Jenny, Andrea Dean. It is a delight to work with you. Thank you for everything that you do to make these weekly podcasts come to life. Friends, thank you for joining us. Please go and continue to spread the word. It has been a wonderful night. Let's see the witness of these words in a little production that has been put together for you now. The music by Danielle Ann Lynch.
I see God through your eyes, in the smile on your face, in the touch of your hand on my arm, in the taste of my song on your lips. Is there any way to know what I feel inside is true? One way for me to be with God is to share my time with you, I hear God in your voice when you choose your words so carefully, walking along the sand, paddling in the sea, turning time into memory. Is there any way to know what I feel inside is true? One way for me to be with God is to share my time with you, as I sit around talking and drinking wine with you. I learn something about you. When we have a chance to sing and play and make music together, every breath is true. I know God in the thoughts that you share, how you love the fog that hangs in the air, when our silence says more than words, as the Spirit moves between us. Is there any way to know?
Hi, my name's Josephine,
And I'm Penny.
and we both had the wonderful opportunity of contributing to Australian Women Preach, but more than that, of receiving the gifts of such a fabulous range of people.
It's really wonderful to hear the voices of women across the churches from different traditions each bringing their own approach and insight.
It shows what treasures there are amongst us and what the beloved community of the church could truly be if we all modelled this.
Thank you for staying with us tonight. Tonight would not have been possible without the creativity, courage and tenacity of Sue Whitnoon, who pulled this together in collaboration with the Australian Women Preach Committee. Thank you, Sue, for bringing this together. And we would not be live without the technical skills and ever generous presence of James, who has joined us to make this happen tonight. So thank you to Sue and to James and to everybody who's joined us.
Yeah,
Have a
and
fabulous-
on behalf of all of us, Rachel, what a beautiful job pulling all of this together and convening the whole night. So thank you so much for the beautiful prayer, the reflection, and for the wisdom that you brought to tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, everybody. Very proud to know you all. Very proud to be part of us. Well done.